Some of you may have heard of the Great Reset.
What's the what is the Great Reset?
Reset.
So that...
Is it a version of the New World Order? Is that what they're changing the name to?
You know how I feel about political outlooks and differences in political outlooks. I don't think it's a weakness. I think it's a strength. And I think America needs to get back to being able to have a conversation with people who don't agree. We learn so much from each other when we do that. You, I think, are going to hear and learn and question and disagree, or perhaps really agree, like very few podcasts will push you to. You're going to learn an awful lot.
Global carbon prices, only eat meat as a treat, billions of refugees from climate change. I have only ever repeated the words of Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, the words of Prince Charles, who said use all the levers, the words of the head of the United Nations, Guterres, who says we must use COVID to counter climate change, and many other very powerful and influential individuals.
Trickery even then, but I think good little trickery.
Well, you live and learn, you know.
That's right. So we're talking about the New World Order. In the New World Order, we had the war with England, and that was the Revolutionary War. And there was the banking system that was set up, and that was Alexander Hamilton that set it up originally after that. Thomas Jefferson then went ahead and decided this was not good for the American people. And then after that, we had the War of 1812, and then we come to Andrew Jackson, and he fought the bankers again, and then we have the Rothschilds, and their dynasty is building. Tell us about the Rothschilds now, how they enter into the picture as far as, shall we say, the Federal Reserve is concerned.
Among the listed directors are 4 former NATO commanders, 13 representatives from major defense contractors, 11 directors are current or former military generals or admirals, 41 directors are active in government or private security, including the National Security Council and various public and private security policy groups, including cybersecurity. And also on this board is G4S. This is the international security company, the second largest employer in the world, with 650,000 people, but it's a private security people. Those are the ones with the dogs up in the Dakotas that were attacking the people trying to prevent the pipeline.
Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era. But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract. In short, we need a great reset.
So I'm going to agree, actually, with the Times. They call us conspiracy theorists for saying this, and I want to agree that it would be a conspiracy if that's what we were saying. But this is no conspiracy, because they're not really hiding it. It's out, fully, open, in the public.
From the very beginning, the CIA has used money and control over people to seek control over the so-called free, pluralistic, democratic institutions of other countries. But then the great revelation. According to this poll, 35% of Americans believe that El Salvador has a pro-Soviet government. It doesn't say what the remaining 17% believe, but it wouldn't surprise me if they had Duarte confused with Khomeini and said El Salvador has an Islamic fundamentalist government. Well, you know, it's really ignorance, it's apathy, it's disinterest on the part of us Americans, generally speaking, certainly not the people of this conference, but generally speaking, that allows Reagan to get away with this and will probably allow Bush to do the same. Because I have been searching and talking to people looking for indications that the Bush program would be any different from the Reagan program. And so far, I haven't found a word. That means that this human cost is going to be continuing. People are going to keep on dying down there, and it could get much worse in El Salvador. As a matter of fact, I'll stop now in just a moment, but I want to mention the FEMA program, the Rex 84. I know a lot of you know about this. It was a program drawn up in the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the early 1980s in the event that the United States had to introduce troops to El Salvador or invaded Nicaragua. The government, or that is the Reagan-Bush administration, anticipated riots, big street demonstrations, a lot of civil disorder. in protest against that invasion of Central America. They drew up a document and a plan whereby the president, by a stroke of his pen, would suspend the Constitution, establish as commander-in-chief martial law in this country, and hundreds of thousands of people would be rounded up and interned on military reservations. I think they selected 12 or 14 military bases, where people would be put without trial, without charges, just on ice to get them off the streets. Now, in the plan that I've read about, supposedly these were going to be undocumented Latin Americans. But in actual fact, it was going to be every one of us who went out on the street. Well, that plan, of course, is still sitting there for the president's signature. We're that close to fascism in this country.
I want you to really think about that. And if you still say yes,
that's what a military dictatorship would be. There would be more and more racism, more and more xenophobia and so forth. Well, the problem is that it's not only that we're lucky, everybody's lucky, I think, that the invasions never happened. But that doesn't mean they can't happen under...
Global corporate media are owned and controlled by the transnational capitalist class. Their primary goal is promotion of products and pro-capitalist propaganda through their psychological control of human desires, emotions, beliefs, fears, and values. That's what media does to us. Corporate media does this by manipulating our feelings and our cognition of human beings worldwide and promoting entertainment viewing as a distraction to global inequality.
The situation is getting worse and worse. The political repression is getting greater. There were more death squad assassinations during the first 5 months of this year than in all of last year. And the popular organizations are growing again in strength and taking to the streets, students, trade unionists, and so forth, and peasant organizations. And as this situation gets worse with the election scheduled for March for the United States is going to deteriorate, and it already is deteriorating. The FMN correlation between the the force, FMN, and the government military force is going against the government. It's going against the military. The FMN dispersed in smaller units, and that has forced the military to do the same thing, which makes those military units all the more vulnerable, and so the war goes on in a more favorable fashion. The danger, again, that troops might have to be introduced, and perhaps an invasion of the United States, who knows, but FMN have not been able to do it. The only other alternative, if you want to solve things by force, is military. So this document of FEMA is very important. We may be on the verge of that in very few years.
During this period, 5,000 communists were forced to flee the country. More than 1,000 went to prison. The climate was such that anyone who even leaned to the left was completely persecuted. But just to show how far it would take things in the legal system, the US government went beyond hard prison sentences. In 1951, Communist Party members Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were found guilty of being spies. But their sentences would be much different than their predecessors. The judge convicted them not for espionage, but for the murder of all the American soldiers who had been sent to die in Korea. On June 19, 1953, they were executed.
Don't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake.
I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. Yeah, there will be no private property, they hope, they say, by 2030. Is that you, Karl Marx?
Freedom on the things that I care about.
So let me just say this. I've owned my private plane, and it's the only thing wealth changes is a private flight. However, I'm with you. I'd be penniless and start over if we could restore actual accountability, responsibility, and freedom. The media is calling us crazy for being concerned about this. Now, this might work in some countries where you've never had private property, but we are a country that is based on individuals, individual freedom, and the entrepreneurial spirit of, I want to build something myself. Now, surely that article was from 4 years ago, so they don't still believe that communist bullcrap, do they? Well, let's look at something more current.
But a challenge to the system's white supremacy suddenly reared its head in the rural South. In Montgomery, Alabama, a new mass movement was born. The state used its weapons of red baiting, violence, and imprisonment, waging an all-out assault on those who wouldn't accept the status quo.
Here's a video from a couple of months ago. Watch. It's an end of all private property. Now, you could say that they are just saying that because that's the way the world is going. Yes, it is.
Thank you all very much for your attention.
But there have been deep, deep thinkers that have written article after article about what does that mean to Americans? How will that change the fundamental principles of America? We may indeed go that way because it's easier, but that's not what this is. This is a shove into that system without allowing you the opportunity to talk about what does that mean. You'll rent everything. You'll own nothing. Will you be happy? I don't know. Sounds like, and none of us are going to have to, like zero possessions, renting everything from some big amalgamated corporate/government overlord and entity. I've owned my private plane, and it's it's the only thing wealth changes. There is a reason. There is a real good set of reasons that people marched with Black Lives Matter. They have some really good points. Not Black Lives Matter, Inc., but Black Lives Matter. Not the radicals that want to abolish the family and everything else. And we're dismissing the people who say, I don't think I can trust this system anymore. If we shut them down, we're nitroglycerin in a paint shaker.
The Rothschilds and the world order dynastic families, they profit by other people's suffering and despair. They profit when you have a communist revolution go in and murder 10 million peasants. They profit when you have a world war which devastates Europe. And so this is exactly what happens. Baron Alphonse de Rothschild was asked during the communist revolution there, he said, aren't you worried about all of your houses and your vast estates and so forth with the revolution going on? He said, certainly not. He said, you always want to buy when blood is running in the streets. That is, when everybody thinks we're collapsing, nothing's going to be worth anything, and they say, I'm going to dump this for a penny on the dollar. That's when the Rothschilds and the insiders buy everything. And, of course, the United States is coming to that point now. We're in a recession. Real estate is down. This is the time to buy because this is a fluctuating thing. It goes up and it comes down. It goes up and it comes down because it's manipulated. It's always manipulated. J.P. Morgan was asked once, as the leading banker in the United States, someone rushed up to him and said, Mr. Morgan, please, would you tell me what is the stock market going to do? He said, sir, it will fluctuate. I love it. That's a great story. Sir, it will fluctuate. I love it. That's a great story.
These guys were deep thinkers.
Well, some of them got it probably at the time, right?
For where they were.
I believe Wyoming was maybe the first to, make sure that women had the vote. So we have a very strange history. But my point to you is we did have chattel slavery.
We did.
Until like 100 years before my birth or something.
Yeah. I agree. It's horrible.
Okay. However, we had the foresight to have an abstraction because some people figured out how to do this so that we could grow into the country that I think we were always meant to be. And there's a very important concept that came out of France that was taught to me by, I believe, a person who taught Bill Clinton history at Oxford, Earl Jamie, and Weymouth, I can't pronounce his last name, which is a nation is defined to be a group of people who have agreed to forget something in common. In part, we are supposed to remember a lot of the horrible things in our beginning, to forget them later, so that we can become who we were always meant to be without being tied back to 1619, the way Nicole Hannah-Jones wishes to tear us apart and to refound us. We have absolutely very strong obligations, in particular to African Americans, but also to women who were denied the vote, even in the beginning of my grandfather's life. But we also have to realize that we have the blueprint for a country that can accommodate our best selves, and that this is the gift of a patriarchy. It may not resemble us. It may have been a white landowning patriarchy, but goddamn it, if these people didn't effectively have a blueprint that can accommodate people that look absolutely nothing like them.
Yeah.
And the excitement that I have for our country, which is our trajectory, we haven't gotten close. The people who are calling themselves progressives in the streets are correct that the progress has been too slow. On the other hand, to give up this thing in order to pursue fantasies and phantoms, and this is madness. So that's where we are. We've got to do better. But look, the other thing is we've got to talk about the two major cults and what cults are, because I don't think people understand what a cult is. In general, cults are not simply made up of crazy people. Whatever the dominant society is, always has to throw certain items of truth over the walls that it represents. Right? You have to forget certain things. You have to pretend that certain things that are true aren't true. And in so doing, when you have a situation like that, there is always the basis to begin a new civilization based on the idea that the society always has to lie. If the society lies very little, it's not worth joining the irregulars outside city walls. But it is true that our culture has been throwing more and more truth over the city walls, and that has been the basis for the cults that have formed around Wokistan and Magistan. And we have to talk about the fact that both of them have a point, and both of them have become cult-like, therefore to our system.
In my opinion, the Big Bang theory and the theory of evolution and the ball earth theory are all interlinked, and they're all there to make us feel as though we're insignificant.
A lot of people feel that they are not, their interests are not represented by their leaders, right? So whether it was in the United States with the election of President Trump or in Brazil this past weekend, that these changes are happening. My concern is that if these people who feel that the system did not represent them well now have put their person in who they think is going to be different and going to make that change, and if that person doesn't then deliver on the change, what's their next move? What do they go to? And is it protests in the streets? Is it something that turns more violent, more extremist? And I think we haven't seen this play out yet. If there's one issue that I think is vastly underrepresented in the international discussion, it really is
the universe. This is special.
You know, so why, it's like saying a basketball is round, so why isn't the court round? It's a fallacy. So this idea of a ball earth, theory of evolution, the Big Bang, is all about making us feel nothing, so that we can be realized how special we all are, how unique every single life is, then this whole world will change overnight.
We wouldn't allow ourselves to be used by this cabal. We wouldn't allow this planet to be destroyed, because they're destroying it because, oh, it's just an accidental planet, one of millions. We've found other Earths, you know. Eventually, if this one gets too messed up, we'll go to another one. No.
Global carbon prices, only eat meat as a treat, billions of refugees from climate change.
Okay, give me the meat. Make sure you don't lick your fingers. Thanks for the warning. I'll try to remember. Stay here and keep a lookout.
Because bankers consider communism and dictatorship as a good investment. A banker considers a dictatorship as a perfect government because everybody is totally controlled, and if anybody objects to paying high taxes or to paying debts, you can put them in a concentration camp or execute them. You can put them in a concentration camp or execute them.
To the business of innovation.
Lead the nation into unparalleled darkness and despair.
To separate our unclean period, we need effectively a national mikvah from whoever it is that we're meant to be and try again. And we need to cover structural oppression and end to coercion and the conservation of our best values. And if that seems like a tall order, tough shit.
Don't be foolish. They're condemning themselves to death.
I was imagining myself waking up and talking to people saying, come get me and wake me up, I'm alive, I'm here, I'm alive. And they didn't know any of that. But when I came back and I spoke to them, I told them about their fears and their secrets, and I calmed them. They said, how do you know this shit? This is exactly what we feel. I apparently was in the realm of spirit where everything is seen. But I was getting dragged down. What really got me is I'm talking to these beings as I'm like weeping and dying and in hell, and they're like, no, we're from God. We're here to save you or stop this or give you the chance, the opportunity to turn away. And I was literally, I felt, it's like in the movies, the Vanishing Point, Vanishing on 7th Street movie, where when they go into the dark, they just saying, I exist, I exist, I exist, I'm me and that, and then they forget it and just dissolve into nothing. That was what it was. I wasn't saying I exist, I was wondering, what is this? What am I? And it wasn't like I'm in a different realm.
All they did was attack anyone that was raising warnings.
Estimates are that the world's wealth is about $255 trillion, and with U.S. and Europe holding about 2/3 of that total.
Now, to keep it simple, out of those things, let's just consider one of them, and let's call that thing 2.
In addition, 1 out of 3 people suffer from some form of malnutrition, which means they lack sufficient vitamins and minerals in their diet that lead to health issues such as stunted growth in children.
Thing 2 came into existence because thing 3 exists, and thing 3 came into existence because of thing 4, and so on. Okay, now hold that thought for a moment.
This write-up from the New York Times was one of my favorites. Quote,
picture a red flower. Now there's a reason why that flower is red. The flower didn't have to be red. The flower could have been yellow, the flower could have been white, the flower could have been purple, but instead it's red. The redness of the flower came from something else that gave it its redness. If something didn't give the flower its redness, then the flower wouldn't have been red. Now the important thing to remember is that the flower itself is not the same thing as redness. Now it has redness, but it's not redness itself. Back to existence.
It took me an hour. You don't have 20 minutes. You could write something down and say, hey, he has this part wrong, this part wrong. No, in that article, not one time did the New York Times address any of our concerns. Not once.
The LA Times reports this year that 1 out of 9 people go to bed hungry every night.
Existence is something that the flower has, but the flower itself is not the same thing as existence. It only has existence because something else gave it existence.
Each year, poor nutrition kills 3.1 million children under the age of 5. 25,000 people a day, or 9 million a year, die from starvation and malnutrition. This slaughter occurs every day. That's the equivalent of 10 9/11 events every day in the world.
Because unlike everything else, we don't have anything else to point to because thing Z is the first thing to exist. Remember OE, original existence? In other words, you can't point to something that doesn't exist in order to show why thing Z exists, because obviously that doesn't make any sense. Because thing Z didn't get its existence from anything else, then thing Z had to always have existed. So it would be impossible for anything to threaten its existence or to take it out of existence. In other words, thing Z is eternal. Thing Z would not have existence, thing Z would be existence. So what could thing Z be?
That's how the mainstream media works. This is how it carries water for the things that they want you distanced from. They attack people. They don't talk about ideas.
I'm going to talk about the global power elite, the giants of capitalism.
I've owned my private plane, and it's it's the only thing wealth changes.
The conversation today, too, is about the transnational capitalist class.
The flower wouldn't exist unless it got its existence from thing 2, and thing 2 wouldn't exist unless it got its existence from thing 3, and thing 3 wouldn't exist unless it got its existence from thing 4, and this goes on and on. This is not only true for the flower, but this is true for every single thing that you can see right now.
I can say to the American people is watch me. You see what I've done. You see what I'm going to do. Look at me. Compare our physical and mental acuity. I'm happy to have that comparison.
Thing Z would be the starting point and the ultimate reason for why anything at all began to exist, or why anything exists right now. Now this leads to the next question. If the reason why anything exists is because it got its existence from something else, then what's the reason that thing Z exists? In the case of thing Z, things are a little bit different.
What the hell was that all about, right? Holy shit, I don't know how to feel.
Well, it can't be anything physical, because anything physical would have either began to exist, or it's possible for it to stop existing at some point. And because it isn't physical, it also would have to be beyond physical space. Similarly, it would never have begun to exist, and therefore it would have to be beyond time as well.
It's a nigh comical farce and abject failure, but on the other hand,
so in other words, thing Z would have to be an eternal, non-physical, uncaused creator that's responsible for the beginning of all time and all space, and also responsible for everything that did exist, everything that exists now, and everything that will exist in the future.
The worst our nation's basements have to offer. What the fuck? Yes, yesterday, and they got all the way in because Capitol Police put up very little resistance. Yeah, it's almost starting to seem like there's a double standard in this country where law enforcement is concerned. Yeah, if you're a black man, you better stay out of trouble in high school and keep your goddamn hands out of your pockets. You're basically begging to get shot in public.
Does thing Z sound like someone that you've heard about? Some people call him God.
Oh, well, welcome to Congress, sir. Come right on in. No, shit in any chamber you want. It's fine. I'll see you on the internet later. What a fucking disgrace.
So it's important for you to know that he exists. Always have and always will. Oh, and wait until you hear about his son.
Not that anyone was surprised by that, of course, least of all the insurgents. You could just tell they had every expectation of showing up doing whatever the hell they wanted. Complete entitlement, like, for example, Elizabeth from Knoxville. I was just trying to storm the Capitol building as part of a violent revolution, and they were so mean to me. Like, yeah, no shit, you fucking fence post. That's how it works. It's like Mama always said, play stupid games, get maced in the fucking eyeballs, you dumb.
Excuse me, have you seen a little girl with blonde hair and a blue coat?
No, I'm sorry.
Meanwhile, 80% of the people in the world live on less than $10 a day. And the poorest half of the population lives on $2.50 a day. And 1.3 billion people live on $1.25 a day. So there's massive inequality, and 80% of the world is very poor.
Wait a minute. That's more than double the marked price.
Read the sign, lady. Do you want the eggs or not?
Yeah, I want the eggs. What a ripoff.
I just work here. If you want to cry ripoff, yell at the government.
Come on, are we gonna fight or are we gonna check out groceries?
Come on, let's move.
No, I'm gonna help myself to this, are we?
Okay, better yet, let's just call it.
Check this out.